We're going to talk to a great guest. He's the author of Cornered, The New Monopoly, Capitalism, and the Economics of Destruction. He's also a senior fellow at the New American Foundation, and he's written for Harper's Magazine, Financial Times, Harvard Business Review, American Prospect. You get it. He's Barry C. Lynn. Barry, welcome to the Young Turks.
Hey, thanks for having me on tonight.
We appreciate it. First, in your book, you talk about monopoly capitalism. I want to talk about what that means and what you're referring to. So tell us what that means.
Well, basically, it's a way of looking at the political economy that what we have here is not necessarily a system that's run by the government, and it's not really organized in markets. It's organized under large corporations, which means that there's certain companies, I can use Wal-Mart as a good example, that have concentrated so much power that they're able to basically direct much of the economic activity in our economy, much the way a state would in the past here or overseas. So what we have is like very large firms, and Wal-Mart in many cases, just as, again, for instance, they control 30+%, maybe 50+% of the activity, economic activity of certain types of business activities in the United States, and that gives them this immense power over the providers of services, over the providers of products. They basically get to tell people what to do, how to do it, where to do it, and so that's sort of what's happened in this country. It's really quite phenomenally different.
But Barry, I know what you're talking about. I have a lot of friends who run small businesses, and then they have to see if they can get a contract with Walmart or not. And then sometimes Walmart will grind them up and spit them out. They'll go bankrupt because they made a deal with Walmart. I know all the downsides, but they will say to you, Barry, hey, wait a minute now. We competed in a free market and we won, and that's the way the system works. So what's your problem?
Well, actually, they didn't compete in the free market. There were companies that came along before Walmart that had the same idea. There was a company called the A&P, the Atlantic and Pacific. It was a grocery chain in the mid-century. But what happened is back then, our government, or the people of the United States acting through our government, said, you know what, we don't want a single company to direct all of our grocery business in this country. We don't want a single company like Woolworths to do all of our five and dime, all of our discount sales in this country. So what they did is they used their powers, they used our laws, our anti-monopoly laws, to restrict the growth of the A&P, to restrict the growth of Woolworths. And that's what created the ground, the opportunity for Sam Walton back in the 1950s. If we hadn't actually used our government to keep down the monopolies back then, there would have been no opportunity for Sam Walton. So right now what we have is this guy, if they say nowadays that they're the winners and they should keep it all, well, that's actually quite out of the American tradition. It's a direct contradiction to the American tradition.
But Barry, you're referring to what happened after they won and what we should do after they won. But did they really, quote unquote, win in the free market, or do you have a bone to pick with that as well?
Well, yeah, I would actually have a bone to pick with that as well, because what happened is that a company like Walmart, once you get like a little bit of an advantage, then you can win no matter what. So in a case like Walmart, what they did is they went around and they monopolized, basically supplying people in rural communities. And then they used that as their power base to take over suburban areas. And now they're moving into cities. So it's a situation in which they've had an advantage, often a tremendous advantage, over their rivals for a really long time. And that advantage is something that it's based on, a lot of these smaller companies, they're operating in an entirely different system. And one of the things that Walmart does often is it buys up the supply system that feeds the small companies, so that the small companies just don't have there's no chance. There's no way that they can fight. There's no way they can compete.
So Barry, I want to ask you: would you break them up? Would you go in there and say to Walmart, all right, how would you break them? You can't own this store, or you are too big, so we're going to take away your store in California and New York. How does that work?
Well, there's in the past when we broke up Standard Oil in 1911, what they did is they broke it up along state lines. And they said, okay, we're going to break up all these different companies. They actually created 34 different Standard Oils. And they said, okay, now you guys can go out and compete with each other across state lines. There's all kinds of different ways to do it. And, so like what you could do with Walmart is you could break it up according to their distribution centers, because you have to have a distribution center that feeds out to the different stores. They got like 30-something distribution centers. That would be one way to break them up. But yeah, we have to understand it's not just Walmart. Walmart's one of the companies, but this is something that's throughout our system right now. Well, if you look at the beer in this country, 90% of the beer in this country is controlled by two corporations that collude with each other: Anheuser-Busch, InBev, and South African Breweries, which controls Miller Coors. In this country right now, about 80 to 90% of, say, all of the, say, toothpaste in this country is controlled by two companies that collude, and that's Procter & Gamble and Colgate-Palmolive. And they operate together. They have this thing called category management, which they share information about pricing, about how they put, where they put product on shelves, and what's the content of the product. So it's true in terms of the inputs that are inside of our products, like the vitamin C that's in our product. 100% of the vitamin C in the United States comes from a Chinese vitamin cartel. So it's like almost wherever you look, you got problems. Walmart, I just use that because they're big and people know them, but this is a systemic problem. It's in every part of our economy.
Barry, isn't the real problem that they captured the government and they captured the politicians? So, and the capturing of the establishment is so thorough that right now, if you said to Americans, "Oh, we're going to bust up Colgate or ExxonMobil or Walmart," a surprising number might say, "Yeah, hell yeah, go for it," right? But a lot of them certainly would say, "Oh my God, that's unthinkable. Those are great American companies. Why would you want to hurt great American companies like that?"
Well, I mean, I think you're absolutely right. They did. These companies really do control the government. This is sort of where the teabaggers really kind of have it wrong, because what they're out there saying is we got to make the government smaller. Well, actually, that was the problem, because one of the things that happened is that when we stopped using our government to enforce our anti-monopoly laws, these large private governments, and that's what corporations are, they're private governments, they got so powerful that they took over entire activities in this country. And then after they do that, they took over the government. They basically govern entire economic activities in this country, and they use our own government to do it. So when a lot of these smaller business people that say they're against big government, the actual government that they're running up against are private corporate governments that use our public government to regulate them.
So, Barry, I want to ask you the last two quick questions here as we run short on time. And Barry C. Lynn is a senior fellow at the New America Foundation. His book is Cornered, The New Monopoly Capitalism and the Economics of Destruction. One is, what do we do about it? Okay, so we know that they got the government. How do we get it back?
Well, the first thing we have to do is just recognize the problem. I mean, we've been told for the last, 25 years we live in this utopia, this free market utopia, where American dream, and we're going to start a small business. First thing we have to do is wake up. There's hardly a single open market left in this country. If you want to start a small business, well, good luck, because there's not many of those big companies, those big corporations that are going to let you. So you got to see what's in front of your own eyes. Stop listening to the lies. 2, have absolute faith in our ability to work together, because if you bring together all the booksellers in this country, all the beer brewers in this country, all the people who, all the independent plumbers, all the independent garage people, all the independent software people, you got actually a lot of people. Right now, people are not talking to each other. Right now, people are off in their little corners cowering. You bring all the people together, you get people talking, and there's a lot more of us than there are of them.
And then finally, you say that they basically, I don't know if you're saying they invented the word free market, but you trace the history of how the word free market came about, or that phrase. And I was curious about that. How did that come about?
Yeah, I mean, free market is something that, before 1962, it's really hard to find uses of the term free market. Milton Friedman, who's sort of the guy who is the real godfather, the genius behind this sort of laissez-faire takeover, this infeudalization of the United States, he basically created the word free market, the term, in 1962 in a book called Capitalism and Freedom. And what he did is he used it to hide what he really meant, which is laissez-faire. Laissez-faire means let the rich rule. So in order to make sure that Americans didn't understand that what he meant with his deregulation and all that, what he meant was let the rich rule, he called it free market. But whenever we hear the word free market, let's understand it means let the rich rule.
They say freedom isn't really free, and apparently a free market isn't really free either. All right, Barry C. Lynn, the book is Cornered. Thank you so much for joining us on The Young Turks.
Thanks for having me.